Welcome, everybody. Pamela, do you want to kick it off?
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone, for coming. It's great to see such a fabulous turnout. And we've got an incredible panel tonight, and so fascinated to hear what they've got to say about Bitcoin and where we're going with that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mark. He's going to let the speakers introduce themselves. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm Mark Albertson. I'm a journalist writing here on the tech space here in the Bay Area for mostly Silicon Valley media right now, also Global News Service Blasting News, and CBS when I get extra time, which is very rare these days, filling the space. Welcome to all of you. We've got a terrific panel, really good panel tonight, probably reflective of why we've got a full house because of the caliber of the speakers that we have. So why don't we just get right into it and start by having you just tell us a little bit about your company and what you're involved with. And so we're just going to share mics here, guys. So.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for having me, and thanks everybody for showing up. My name is Austin Alexander. I'm with Kraken. We're one of the largest digital asset exchanges on Earth today. We have the largest Euro book. We also trade US dollars, Canadian dollars, Japanese yen, and British pounds. We have 17 cryptocurrencies, digital assets that we trade as well. I think 47 trading pairs. We traded, I forget the number because the numbers are growing fast, but we've been trading billions per month lately. And it's really exciting stuff. Prior to that, I had spent some time at a different, much less reputable cryptocurrency exchange, and prior to that, I co-founded the Bitcoin Center in New York City, which was also doing some digital currency exchange for a while before the benevolent leaders of the state of New York came and made sure that we, in the interest of the public, made sure that we stopped providing that service.
Big fiasco.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we just geofenced New York. My name is Steve Beauregard, and I was one of the early pioneers in the space, even though back in 2012-13 we thought we were super late to the business. I was the founder of GoCoin at that time, and we were the world's highest volume, transaction volume payment processor. So that's websites that want to take Bitcoin as a form of payment. We would provide all those tools to them. I left GoCoin in March. It's been profitable for 3 years. Just got to the point that I was fully vested. And the way I describe it is it was more of a Clydesdale than a unicorn. So even though it was just steady growth, it just wasn't fast enough, and I wanted to be a part of the hot market. So I joined Bloq, and Bloq is founded by Jeff Garzik and Matt Rozak. Anybody who's following the Segwit 2X controversy knows well who Jeff Garzik is. The man is absolutely legendary, I must say. A pleasure to work with. One of the brightest guys, brightest minds in the business, regardless of what you may think of which way that debate ought to go. As you probably saw, we announced at Money 2020 last week a new token called Metronome, which is largely because of his experience with this governance and behavior and dissent in the industry. And essentially, it's a token that will be launched, and when it launches, nobody can ever mess with it. It's just set in stone forever. So anyway, Bloq, we're putting large enterprise solutions into the biggest financial institutions in the world, and basically taking the red hat model and providing SLAs to those corporations, so they're not just relying on volunteers, but still benefit from the open source community.
Hi, my name is Margot Abedisian. I almost started mining in 2011. But I didn't, or else I'd be on my island retired. And then in 2012, I relaunched the first American Bitcoin exchange called TradeHill. And then I co-founded 2 other companies, one AlphaPoint, the other Monetigo. They're both still around. And I did a couple other things, like organize the first Bitcoin Education Day on Capitol Hill. And now I am Executive Vice President at Transform Group. We're the leading PR firm. We've been representing blockchain companies since early 2013. Now our main bread and butter, I would say, are ICOs. We've done over 60, including Ethereum, the first one, MadeSafe, Augur, Quantum, Gnosis, Golem, Bancor, Matchpool, ton of them. I can't even list them all. We don't have time for that. But and I also have a pre-ICO investment pool where people can subscribe to get memos, since I have a lot of access and knowledge on ICOs, and we kind of do the vetting for people, and you can invest in them if you want at a cheaper price because they're pre-ICOs. It's called coolpool.me. And yeah, thanks for having me. Oh, I used to also have a comedy show at the Bitcoin Center.
Hi, my name is Charlie Lee. I created Litecoin in 2011, and I joined Coinbase 2013, was the director of engineering there, left Coinbase recently to decide to focus on Litecoin. Most of you guys know me because you follow me on Twitter. One of the biggest trolls on Twitter. And I like to say that the only reason why people like to talk to me is because they can't find Satoshi. So I mean, yeah, that's about it.
Hello, my name is Morgan Rockwell, and originally when I got into Bitcoin, I founded Bitcoin Kinetics in California, and we started making machines that took Bitcoin. And in the 2015 wildfires, we lost our headquarters, so they reincarnated the company as Bitcoin Inc. in Nevada and have been lobbying the Nevada government to take Bitcoin into the slot machines and lobbying our US military to use Bitcoin on bases. So I'm trying to become a counselor for Bitcoin because there's no face for Bitcoin, and a lot of old people in the government don't know who to talk to, and I don't know if they're gonna all call, Satoshi here. So it's a good thing to put a salesperson for the government, and I think the government's a big, important part of Bitcoin because most people think Bitcoin's going to destroy the government, and there's a lot of people that get paid by the government, so it's kind of a catch-22 to teach the entire government how that process is going to happen, and it's a long process. So I really focused on the U.S. Army and the Training and Doctrine Command to make sure that our military knows how to use Bitcoin at the core level so they're not ignorant, and if someone uses it against our country or other countries, that they understand the dynamics of that. So that's pretty much what I do now.
All right, good job. Well, let's start. I want to kick this off a little bit with, Steve mentioned Money 2020. I was there as well last week covering it. And one of the speakers was Patrick Gauthier, who is the Vice President of Payments for Amazon. And I'm going to just read a statement to the panel to get your reaction to this. And his statement, this was just last week, said, "It's not reached the point yet where it's simple for the consumer. As long as Bitcoin is in the realm of the crypto geeks, by definition, it's going to fail." So, crypto geeks, what do you think? Is the head of Amazon Payments right, or is he wrong?
Well, one of my favorite quotes is from the CEO of, I'll actually give you the quote first. It says, "Netflix isn't even on our radar in terms of competition." CEO of Blockbuster. So I think that sort of drives the point home. There's been plenty of blunders like that over the years. I mean, there's plenty from Jamie Dimon as well. And I totally agree that we're not there yet, but the storm is coming, and it's coming really fast and furiously. The amount of brain power going in, just the people in this room, a testament to the amount of interest. I run the LA Bitcoin meetup, and we decided back in 2013 that the number of people in the room was directly proportional to the price of Bitcoin. And so you see that, and as that happens, the crowds keep coming, people start investing their time, their energy into it, and it's a train that's not going to stop.
Okay, other comments?
I mean, there are different uses of Bitcoin too. So I don't know what Amazon is doing in terms of converting different currencies or moving money around, but even using Bitcoin as an intermediary, since it can be a store of value, it actually is, digital gold has a value that you can immediately switch out. I mean, there's other things you can do with Bitcoin besides just taking payments. And expanding to other countries is probably a more valid use case for them too if they want people paying and you can't get bank accounts in other countries. So I think it's a very limited view and he'll probably change his mind soon.
Yeah, I'd have to maybe echo some of what Steve said, but also say that the user interface, user experience for Bitcoin and crypto in general is not great. The infrastructure on the whole is very immature. Buying Bitcoin and getting a hold of crypto is not an easy thing. You have to be highly motivated to actually acquire it. There's a lot of barriers along the way. That being said, and what I'd like to echo Steve about is that it's almost unbelievable the amount of genius people that are getting involved and getting obsessed with this technology every single day. And a couple of those people will probably help to build out that infrastructure and make the user experience better. And this is something that's been like repeated ad nauseum, but eventually, and probably soon, you know, your grandmother will be able to make a payment with Bitcoin. She won't even know it. Just like she and 99% of people who are sending an email today have no idea how it worked and how it got to where it's going.
Charlie or Morgan, any comments on that? You good? Okay, all right. Let's keep going then. So, one of the stories that's been in the news very directly, of course, has to do with ICOs. We all know China took action several months ago. More recently, South Korea has, and even Vladimir Putin, who suddenly woke up and decided he was very interested in Bitcoin, announced that they would no longer be funding in Russia for those companies. So I'd like to get the sense from you, where is this going? What's going to happen as we're seeing what appears to be a crackdown in international markets in this regard?
Well, I mean, you can't really crack it down. It's something, once the genie is out, there's not really much you can do about it. We saw China banning Bitcoin and shutting down exchanges a few years ago, and that didn't work out so well. So I really think it's more about how they can make money, how they can maybe try to control it, or how to make their own thing. So to me, it's actually a good thing because it brings it in the news again, and it brings the attention to more people. But just like when people said that the American government hated Bitcoin, when really they actually kind of like it because you're able to trace it, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, there's really nothing they can do. So it's not something that worries me. In fact, it brings it on more people's radar.
Yeah, so for like banning Bitcoin, I mean, we saw China ban Bitcoin exchanges. They effectively stopped all Bitcoin trading in China. It hasn't really affected the price at all. I mean, the price actually went up quite a bit since then. So it's actually a good thing. Now we know that China can't really like hurt Bitcoin. So they might unban it, and they might ban it again in the future. It's not really going to matter because it's just one country. In terms of banning ICOs or regulating it, I think it's just a matter of time because the ICO craziness this year was just too crazy. People losing a lot of money or making a lot of money. It needs to be regulated, in my opinion, to a certain degree, because a lot of these projects were just raising money without anything, right? With a white paper full of jargon, with a website that looks pretty, and just trying to fool investors into investing it so that they can sell to the next fool, right? So that's just going to ask for trouble when the market crashes. People who lose a lot of money are people who are actually like the late adopters, the one that can't afford to lose money. It's similarly where when Bitcoin reaches new highs, finally like the grandmas hear about it and they buy into Bitcoin, and then it turns out to be at a 3-year high, right? So I think regulation is important and it's happening. Obviously, you don't want to regulate it too much and like stifle innovation. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think the U.S. will start regulating too.
I want to talk about counterparty, because no one talks about counterparty. And it is using the dust and the layers and the addresses and the blockchain of the Bitcoin network, and you can make as many tokens as you want for $8. and no one ever talks about that. And it's a much more secure system than any of these other token creation systems because it's using a 10 exahash blockchain. And that's something I think like the Pepe cards, the rare Pepe, which is like a Pokemon card that you can trade on your phone, which is a rare, scarce digital token. I think that is the kind of case uses of the future, whether it's gaming or digital collection or an ID. I mean, you can make AI APIs on Google and make them talk to Bitcoin wallets. So I've made a voice-operated Bitcoin wallet. So like you're saying, user interfaces are important. And there needs to be a way you just talk to Alexa and talk to Google, and you could talk to Satoshi. You go to satoshiapi.com, and there's an AI that you can say, order me McDonald's, and it'll spend Bitcoin. So there's a way to do user interfaces. You just have to want to do that. You know, the first things I did for Bitcoin was make a washing machine turn on for $1 payment, the Bit Washer. You know, and it was great because I put an Arduino in there.
Triggered all kinds of AML.
Oh my God, and where do you think most of that ransomware shit came from? So it scares me that I made a laundry machine turn on for $1 and now you can turn someone's computer off for $300. So that code is really important to Bitcoin because it shows that Bitcoin could be used in the real world. And these tokens are like very important tools. Like Chuck E. Cheese should have a token. I used to work in an arcade long before Bitcoin, and the owner, Tony, he had Tony Coin. So he just took your $20 and gave you $20 digits on a card, and he told me, you know, 5 years later, look, all these 25-cent games no one plays for, I made $30,000 in extra quarters that no one used. That's an ICO, but that was long before Bitcoin. So those kind of tokens have that use for a business. But once you start saying they're going to make money for other people, once you start calling them a security, that's a fine line of, like Charlie said, lying to people and scamming them. You got to be honest, at least as a developer, on what you're doing. And everyone wants to get paid, but you got to be honest about how you're doing that.
All right, Austin, you got a comment?
Yeah, maybe let's speak something about the geopolitical ramifications of Bitcoin, which once you start thinking about them, assuming the success of Bitcoin, it can get pretty heavy, I guess. But one thing is that China banning Bitcoin, in a way, it almost highlights the relevance of Bitcoin. And maybe that's why China bans Bitcoin and the price goes up 50% or whatever it has. It's kind of like a geopolitical game theory, and maybe it's analogous to North Korea. North Korea banned the internet years and years ago, and did it harm the economy of the internet more, or did it harm the economy of North Korea more in the long run, that action? So I think you only need a few jurisdictions to embrace the technology, and it will flourish because it's from the regulatory perspective, it's a new paradigm. There's been nothing that's less regulatable by human beings and governments in history than Bitcoin. So perhaps in a way it's a healthy thing when repressive regimes ban the tools of freedom.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time talking to regulators around the globe, from Singapore to Europe to the UK, of course the US, and various other places. And I'm really glad to see that they've mostly taken a light touch on the regulatory side. With ICOs, I hope that remains the same. And I do agree with Charlie, especially when you get into the equity-based tokens. But in the example we were talking about, tokens at a game, you put your $20 in, you get the tokens out, and you can use those tokens to play the game, right? So the only place that's really interesting, and anybody here thinking about an ICO, like writing a white paper, putting it together, investing in them? Yeah, me too. I invested in all of them, but I have an acid test which I think is pretty foolproof. You got to ask yourself, what do I need this token for that one of the other existing tokens can't do, right? So do they have a captive market? Why was Bitcoin so successful in the early days? Because of Silk Road. People wanted drugs, and they would go buy Bitcoin because it's the easiest, safest way for them to go buy the drugs, right? There was a captive market. That cycle of use showed them that this has utility, it's valuable, right? So you ask yourself, if it's a gaming token, is it really used at how many places can you use it? Where is this useful? So you have to have that network effect within your own ecosystem. I think Uber's out of their mind for not launching a token, because Uber token, if Uber were to say, this is the best way to use our Uber service. You want to use a credit card? Guess what? We're going to give you $20 for $20, but you use Uber token, we're going to give you $50 for the equivalent, because they would have the ability to do that with their own utility token. They have enough people that use the service, that want the service, that they will use that token. They'll find a way if that's the most efficient way to use the token. So.
I just want to make a quick point. Just because there isn't regulation out there doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. We've personally known people who have gone to prison because they were skirting the line a little bit. And I think with ICOs, it's the same thing. And I deal with a lot of ICOs or people pitching me ICOs or wanting me to work with them. And, if you're getting into this realm of it could possibly maybe be a security, that really changes the ball game. And it is way better to be overcautious and make sure that you are not either dealing with Americans or you have a lot of lawyers and dealing maybe with accredited investors. But it's not, it's FinTech. And I think a lot of times people get a little, think it's just like a regular tech company, like, we're just gonna do whatever, and then we'll deal with the consequences. Like, it's not Uber company, it's FinTech. You're dealing with people's money. There are a lot of different rules, and even if the rules don't exist yet, you have to think of it in terms of, what's the most cautious I could be? What is the hardest regulations if they came down? What does that box look like? And we're starting to see that now with the SEC coming out with their guidance and then even shutting down some ICOs because what they're doing is not in the legal realm, despite there being anything really specifically saying what you can and cannot do for ICOs.
All right. Well, let's flip it around. We talked about crackdown on ICOs, but yet it seems like there's I talked to one venture capitalist in 2020 who said he was getting 50 to 70 proposals a week for an ICO. So there's an explosion, obviously. And again, another person I covered in a panel said, well, 80%, that was his number, are going to vaporize. Do you guys agree? What do you think is going to happen to this market?
Well, I think the interesting thing that I've been seeing with ICOs, and I literally looked from last year to now how many ICO requests we've gotten and even the money going into it, is before it was like, oh, I have this idea, I want to create whatever blockchain thing. Now we're starting to see real companies that already have the market share, whether it be Opskins, which is leading in gaming skins, which is a $50 billion industry, or Unicoin, which is the largest esports betting platform, now creating their digital tokens. These are real companies that are very profitable, that are seeing the blockchain benefit. And to me, if I'm looking to invest or picking pool companies for my pool, it's like, do they already have VC money? That's already, the VCs do a lot of the due diligence for you. Are they already profitable? Do they have partnerships? So to do a successful ICO now, the bar is set really high. Do you want to invest in someone's idea, or do you want to invest in something that's already existed with a team that already has a proven track record? So I think it's going to become a lot harder to raise money with ICOs. And having raised money with a traditional blockchain company, it's really, really difficult. And I moderated a panel with some of the biggest VCs in the space, and they even said they don't invest usually in non-American companies. And a lot of these blockchain companies are not American. So it's becoming more difficult, I would say, to be an ICO and raise money. There are a lot of other things to look at or to have before you do one.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a lot harder to do ICO or raise money with ICO, because there's already a lot of ICOs out there that's sucked up the liquidity of the winnings. Yeah, the winnings. And I think the reason why it was so easy to do ICOs the past year is because of how much Bitcoin and especially Ethereum has gone up in the past 2 years. And also because the DAO hard fork, people actually got their money back. So it felt like it was like house money. So they would just put it into another risky investment and turns out they're making a lot of money, and all this money just flew into all these ICOs. But now that the money is all like mostly invested, to do a successful ICO, raising a lot of money is gonna be a lot harder, and that's a good thing, because the problem with ICOs that I have the past year is basically the incentives weren't aligned. So when you're doing a startup, you want it so that the success of the start, like you're motivated to help the startup succeed, and when it succeeds, you get your payout. But with ICOs, you get the money, like you get a lot of money right away, and you can have like very fancy office space, you can throw big parties. It's kind of like the internet boom, right? You just got a lot of money, and what's incentive to actually produce the product? Even if you had good intentions before the ICO, it may turn out to be a big failure because the incentives aren't aligned. Yeah, and most ICOs actually don't have good intention in the first place. So I would say like 90% of these ICOs won't actually come out with a good product, and the investment will crumble.
There's another aspect to the success of ICOs, and that's like most people on Earth are very restricted in what they've been allowed to invest in traditionally. If you look at the United States, you have to invest in anything unorthodox, you have to be an accredited investor with a very high level of assets or income, and you basically have your benevolent leaders standing in the way telling you, no, we know what's best for you to invest in, and it's not this. Go to E-Trade or Schwab, they'll hook you up. Now, and that's just the US, then think about the millions and millions of billions of people around the world who have had access to nothing to invest in. And so this, for the first time, for many millions of people, and especially in Korea, which we have some guests here who can speak to, and Korea is a very wealthy first world country with third world capital controls, and you have a whole nation of people there who have been so hamstrung in what they're able to put their savings and wealth in, and this has been kind of a release for the first time ever, and then it will become much more mature, and I hopefully the investors will become much more discriminating. I hope, maybe not, but definitely 80%, far more than 80% are going to vaporize. Far more than 90% are going to vaporize for sure.
And I don't think that's from bad intention, honestly. I think there certainly are some people out there that are just doing a money grab, and we've seen a couple of quite successful ones that have been that way. But I do believe that most of them will go back to zero. If you look at an ICO on the cheap, you can get it done for about 10 grand. The absolute cheap. And I've seen them go as much as up to $1 million to spend to get all the publicity and really do a top-notch job, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact that you can launch one for so cheap means that a lot of them will go back to that zero. But a couple of those are really going to change the world. The ones that really have that market, that build the network effect, that either leverage the company they have and the book of business that they have, or they just innovate in a way that completely disrupts. And I think those are sort of the two categories. And when I'm picking which ones I'm going to invest in, I'm looking for that cycle of use, and I'm looking for the ones that I think can really disrupt, that have the right team.
Well, I'm just gonna say one little thing on the other hand, is that when you do take money in an ICO, it doesn't end there, and you have, instead of raising money from VCs, like 4 people that are on you, what are you doing, and not really that on you, you have thousands of people who are constantly messaging you, who are constantly in Slack, who constantly need updates. What are you doing with this money? In a lot of cases, can see where your money's going because people invested digitally. So you do have this pressure that is not like raising money traditionally. So we'll see what happens and whether or not people can pull off some of this stuff, but there are people constantly on them, messaging them, what are you doing with my money? Even if they invested, $10 in cryptocurrency. Those are usually the worst, actually. Yeah. So I do work with a lot of companies who've already done their ICO, and that is, a constant thing, proving you're not a scam, hitting these milestones. But I think what we're going to be seeing is when people are investing in ICOs, not being able to get the money until they hit milestones. But this is new, and as Austin pointed out, it is allowing a lot of people who wouldn't be able to traditionally invest in things like this, who can make money. I mean, if you invested in the Ethereum ICO, you probably did pretty well, you know?
I want to talk about why all of these tokens that raise all this money don't really express to everyone that they have to sell it back for Ether and Bitcoin most of the time, and they lose 20, 30, 40% of their investment, and they can't explain that. And the basis of these tokens really is based on a token itself. So you can't explain that to naive investors that I made $100 million, but we had to withdraw it and we lost $35 million turning it back into Ethereum. And those are the kind of things that I never see any ICOs really explain, the deep economic dynamics of the after effects, like, is this gonna affect Bitcoin itself or Ethereum itself? And when like wallets and the parity wallets and things like this are having money taken, those kind of events on a blockchain will become precedents for all other blockchains for people to want to act in a certain due diligence way. Like, this is only 9 years old. People want to follow the old FinTech rules, but there's a bunch of 12-year-olds doing this, and they want to make up new rules. They don't care about any of those old rules. So you have to understand that there are 12-year-olds that are millionaires, and their balls haven't dropped, and they have no concept of that economic loss. They don't even think that far ahead. So whether someone's a smart investor or not, young or old, there's always naivety. And like she said, you cannot mess with people's money. I really think this is the future of our food. And really, if people are building companies on tokens that are gonna end up affecting Bitcoin, which is the way I buy food, that's what I worry about, is its indirect effects.
Well, one of the great things about this industry is that we can move really fast. I mean, it's about technology, and that's really kind of the basis of it. So to that point, I mean, I think you're right, where there are these companies raising a ton of money and then dumping the market. But then on the other hand, you have companies like Salt, where people can get loans on their digital assets. And so I wish I had this years ago before I sold a ton of Ether and Bitcoin. I could have just gotten loans for cash, and now they're going after ICOs. Like, hey, look, you don't have to sell this Bitcoin and Ether. Instead, you can get cash for it and get a loan instead of dumping the market. So there are people, I think, thinking about this stuff, and we can move pretty quickly. And I mean, they had a really successful ICO. They're awesome dudes. But we're growing. It's like a growing process. And
We need more Bitcoin investment books.
Yeah, well, that may come.
Bitcoin for Dummies and more are that. Mastering Bitcoin book's great, but there needs to be some 12-year-old books.
Well, let's see, since you brought up Bitcoin, let's bring it back to Bitcoin for a second, because I want to talk about value. Even despite the crazy price, I pulled this stat in advance of our panel here. There's a recent report showing that only 3 of the leading 500 internet sellers today currently accept Bitcoin for payment. So what's going to change that dynamic? I mean, what's going to happen where it becomes potentially much more widely accepted as the currency that it is?
So online payments, I happen to know a little bit about from running GoCoin for 4 years, and we're nowhere near mainstream need for Bitcoin. The reason I left GoCoin was that use case. It was still just too early. I was talking to Walmart, Domino's, and you name it, every one of the big guys, and they just it's difficult to get, it's hard to get. And we saw people like Lionsgate Film, huge press release, did all the work to get it implemented and integrated. They got very, very few sales. Why? Because why do you need Bitcoin to buy a film on Lionsgate Film? You just don't. You don't get any frequent flyer miles on your credit card. There's no loyalty program around it. It's just too early. But I tell you what, the adult companies that we ran, we had tons of sales. And why? Because it had privacy. People didn't want their spouse to see that they were spending money on, MedArt, for example. And so therefore, they would pay for their monthly subscription with Bitcoin. They did it all day long, and we predicted that. But I thought the market for payments would mature a lot faster than it really did. And it's just not anywhere near mainstream yet. But as we get into these token sales, I think you're going to start seeing things that Overstock does, things that some of these big players that understand the market, they're going to make a big move and they'll be very successful. That's going to be the game changer as far as I'm concerned.
The way I see it, Bitcoin is more store of value first and payment method second. Because Bitcoin as a payment method can't compete with what we have today, can't compete with Visa. Right now, if you go to a store, you swipe a card, in a few seconds.
Litecoin.
You can't compete with Litecoin. Yeah, so you go to a store, you swipe a Visa card, and in a few seconds, your payment is done. But if you use Bitcoin, you have to use QR codes, you have to potentially wait for a confirmation, and it's just not as simple. It's hard to use. So the infrastructure is not there for it to be simple right now. Eventually, it'll be built out with Lightning Network. Things will be instant payment, stuff will work a lot better. But the reason why we need payment for Bitcoin and Litecoin and other cryptocurrencies is because people actually have Bitcoin and Litecoin as store of value, and they want to be able to spend it, right? They don't want to have to go to Coinbase, convert a dollar, send it to their bank account, and then use your regular payment methods to spend dollar. They would rather just spend Bitcoin, make it really easy to spend Bitcoin. That's why we need payment merchants to accept Bitcoin and Litecoin. But it's not what is giving Bitcoin value today. What's giving Bitcoin value today is because it's a great asset class. It gives you freedom of money. You can use it wherever you want without anyone being able to stop you. So it's the censorship resistant part is giving it value. Once people actually have the coin, then they will need a place to spend it. So it's kind of a chicken egg problem, right? So we need people to actually have the coin, and then for those people to say, hey, Amazon, you should accept Bitcoin because otherwise I won't buy from you because I can buy from your competitor which accepts Bitcoin. And we're not there yet. Like it will take a few more years when mainstream actually has cryptocurrency and want to spend it, then the merchants will say, okay, we're gonna accept it because everyone wants to spend it. So getting to the first part is where we are right now. And then by then we'll have Lightning Networks, we'll have cross-chain atomic swaps where people can just spend coins without even knowing how things work. They'll be like, I wanna send some coins to this merchant. It could be going through Lightning Network, it could be native on-chain, it could be Litecoin, it could be some other coin, it could be something we haven't thought of today. And all that will be built out. But we're very early, we're like early days. And right now, if you're spending Bitcoin, you have to know like how it works. When the transaction is stuck in the mempool, you have to know how to like increase fees on it or how to get it through or just wait however long. That's something that like my grandma would never want to deal with. And credit card is still king right now for payments, so it'll take some time. But I'm not worried because once people actually have it, then they'll realize the power of cryptocurrency and why like sovereignty of money is so important. And then by then everybody will be using it and places will be forced to accept it.
I want to give another example, just one more quick example. The other aspect of that is the IRS guidance of having to pay taxes on everything all the way down to a cup of coffee, which is absurd. There is a piece of legislation that's being pushed forward which is saying anything under $600 purchased with cryptocurrency would be exempt, which I would very much support. But when IRS sent that guidance out, literally the GoCoin transactions got cut in half overnight. All of a sudden people didn't want to spend their coins because they all of a sudden have to pay probably short-term capital gains on what they, so now the coffee is only you're giving your Bitcoin up, but you also have to pay taxes on it. The other aspect is the timing. Bitcoin's a pretty lousy transactional currency, especially for small dollar values. And one of our customers was movietickets.com. And they said, we have to issue the ticket right away. And we were like, well, we have to wait for the confirmation to make sure the coins actually get there. And they were like, we can't wait. I mean, their whole experience of getting their movie tickets, they're not gonna sit around and wait for a confirmation to get the tickets issued. Sometimes they're right there at the theater. So, Litecoin actually turns out to be a better currency because the transaction times or the block times are a lot faster. So, I think some of the new higher volume transaction networks might outdo Bitcoin. Bitcoin is definitely a much better storage of value than
Yeah, I mean, if you are a believer in Bitcoin, why do you want to spend your Bitcoin when you think it's going to become worth like $10,000 next year?
Exactly.
So it's really hard to want to spend Bitcoin if you don't have to, and you believe it's going to be worth a lot more. You'd rather use cash or credit or whatever. So I had a startup a minute ago, and we actually use Bitcoin as an intermediary. So the corresponding banking network if you are familiar with it, is basically a bank who has a trust relationship with another bank saying, hey, this person wants to send money here. Usually that bank has a relationship with someone else. So it's this whole process of banks saying, hey, I owe you, can you credit this person? And we use Bitcoin as an intermediary where we did immediate buys and sells from one currency to another. And so that, to me, was a really interesting use case because now you have this value, digital gold, that has a value in different currencies, and you're able to transfer money from one currency to another. And Bitcoin's an intermediary, and you don't necessarily have to use Bitcoin to buy something.
I regret every Bitcoin I ever spent.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
All right, if I hadn't sold any of my Ethereum or Bitcoin, I'd have about $80 million.
I'm not complaining though.
So I live in Las Vegas on Fremont Street. I live in the Gold Spike, which is owned by Amazon and Zappos, and I pay my rent to Amazon. I have to sell my Bitcoin and give them cash. But about 5 or 6 restaurants on Fremont Street take Bitcoin, and there's 3 Bitcoin ATMs that I do mechanical maintenance on the street. So living in the petri dish of downtown Old Vegas, I can buy food 4 times a day with Bitcoin, and I do every day. And it costs me $3 or $4, and I don't care because no one steals my money when I go to sleep. I've had $50,000 taken from me through PayPal one night just because some guy was 30 people I traded with, and he reversed everything. So that kind of experience makes me want to pay a $5 fee every time I buy a $5 euro at Coney Island because I don't care about that. I hope everyone doesn't forget 3-day ACHs and checks, and JP Morgan ruined Nikola Tesla's dream. So if you put your money in someone else's hands, I'm willing to pay a tax in Nevada where the governor made Bitcoin tax-free. And the profits that I'm making on that, if I have to give my federal government that so that they don't rob my money while I'm sleeping, you gotta equate all that. At the very least, I could buy food every day with Bitcoin, and I hate it because I know it's gonna be worth millions of dollars, but I love that I could spend Bitcoin every day. I've spent so much Bitcoin, like at $20 on burgers. I bought a $2,000 bug at $100 of Bitcoin. Now it's millions of dollars for a bug, and I don't even have it anymore. So I know that, but if I didn't do that, everyone around me wouldn't have known what the fuck Bitcoin was. You need to use it,
It's good that people are out there spending it because we need some supply. There's obviously no supply. It's
Well, there's a
if
casino
it wasn't for you, we'd already be $10,000.
There's a casino in Vegas where you
This
can
is
gamble.
the D, right?
Yeah, and you can put your money in the ATM and fly home. So it's a great ecosystem to try it out,
All right, we're gonna open it up here for questions in just a minute, but since I've gotta get to this question because everybody asked it, we gotta do it. 1 year from now, October 30th, we have a live stream, we have the cameras rolling, you're on tape. Who wants to be dead wrong in public?
Well, I think the best predictor of future price is current price. So the safe thing to say would be like $6,130, but but I think we could see $20,000 Bitcoin a year from now pretty easily.
I'm going to cover the spectrum. So Ethereum, I'm going to say it's going to stay relatively stable because of all the selling pressure from the ICOs. So I think Ethereum probably 400-ish. Bitcoin, I'm more in the camp with Austin here, but I'm going to go more like $12,000. Litecoin's going to be way over $200, and Dash I think will be about $500.
I'm just saying 8,500 for Bitcoin.
Yes.
I want to stay under it. I want to go over. The price is right. I'm gonna win, right? What are we winning?
Falling down the year.
I don't make price predictions because I'm always wrong, and then I get blamed for it. So
I will say that 1 Bitcoin will equal 1 Bitcoin. 1 Ethereum will equal 1 Ethereum. 1 Litecoin will equal 1 Litecoin. Bitcoin,
That's why how we have to think.
and the fiat will disappear and no one will
Yes,
carry
you guys
it.
are chickens.
All right, there you go. There's a guy that probably will be dead right in public.
Non-investment advice, please.
Okay, all right, that's right.
I'm legally obligated.
That's right, no investment advice, this is strictly for our own amusement. All right, let's open it up for questions. Who has questions for this great panel here tonight? Yes, right there.
Hi, I have a question. I was always wondering, the Litecoin is better than Bitcoin, especially transaction is faster than Bitcoin. So why don't you guys tell Amazon to use Litecoin? Because everyone's waiting this news.
Okay.
Well, like I said, like Amazon is probably not ready to accept cryptocurrencies, because it doesn't really move the needle for them, right? It's accepting credit card and it's just much easier for them. In order to accept cryptocurrencies, they have to, like, it's not gonna give them more sales. Like, it might give Overstock more sales, but it won't give Amazon more sales. And it's just more hassle. And if something goes wrong, then if the government cracks down on Bitcoin, then they might get in trouble. So it's not worth it for Amazon to accept Bitcoin or Litecoin. So we have to. It takes time, right? We have to move slow.
Well, in Japan, everybody uses Bitcoin for payments.
Everybody uses Bitcoin for payments in
For the
Japan.
bar, for the restaurants and the electric store, people use Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's because of the recent regulation change they had where they accepted it as a currency and there's no taxes involved. So you're right that is a place. We don't have that here yet in the US. So we still have the burden of trying to figure out what taxes we owe on the gains on the currency. So that definitely is hampering the market. If they were to lighten that, that would definitely make a difference. So it's the number one thing I heard from big manufacturers or big brands. It doesn't move the needle for us. The number one thing we heard. And the ones that really wanted to do it really kind of wanted the PR angle, and that ship's kind of sailed too.
Okay, next question. Yes, right here. Let me try to get the mic to you here so everybody can hear you. There you go.
So the rise of cryptocurrencies has largely happened since there's been a large improvement in the economy since 2008, 2009. What happens in a distressed world economy to cryptocurrencies?
I think you're going to see an absolutely massive transfer of wealth. I think that will be the real catalyst for the emergence of the cryptographic economy. I mean, Bitcoin was created in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, and almost as an alternative to the traditional system, which well, for most of the world is just absolutely unusable. But in the West, despite the interventions and the expense and the speed, banking works for most people most of the time. But the reality is that banks are bankrupt by definition, right? One thing people understand is that in order to have FDIC insurance, you must run fractional.
We lose money.
Yeah, so
More of it, we lose money.
I think if you see a crisis in faith in the economic system and the institutions, I think that the speed at which you'll see wealth run into cryptocurrency will be just completely unprecedented to what we've seen so far.
Well, I see Bitcoin as digital gold, right? It's a good asset class. So if you see inflation or hyperinflation in countries, you see people just run towards Bitcoin or gold or even US dollar right now, right? But one day we'll see US dollar inflate or hyperinflate, and at that time, this will be all crazy. Right? The history of fiat money is no fiat money has lasted more than a few hundred years. So I don't expect the US dollar to last, given how much money we're just printing out of nowhere and how much that we're just paying.
Maybe everybody knows this, but just to make sure, there's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be created, and not a single more, nothing more. That's it. And there's nobody in any room in New York or DC that can change that, and the monetary policy is fixed and transparent.
But the stat I hear, and that's really amazing, is that there's more than 21 million millionaires in the world.
33 million millionaires in the world.
Yeah, so if every single millionaire wanted to have one Bitcoin each, there's not enough. So if they each wanted one Bitcoin, the price would be infinite.
You should do that challenge, because Bitcoin price could go up.
They can have one Litecoin each if they want, because.
Okay, hold on a sec here.
So I'll give you two questions if you want to duck the first one. Some of the leaders I know in this space have all been hacked by really sophisticated people lately. It's really easy to hack someone in the US if you can port their phone number and they can get around their two-factor. So since we have this star-studded cast, really practically for the audience, what's best practice in how you store your coins? You know, soft wallets, hard wallets, et cetera, et cetera.
Never connect your phone number to your money.
Cold storage.
So that was, if there's more, like as this.
Try not to use a SIM card, use voice over IP if you gotta use a phone number. At least your SIM card can't get ghosted. And you can blame Google if it happens, not Verizon, because they ain't gonna do shit.
Google Authenticator is better than two-factor.
Way better.
Right. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that. I don't know if there's others.
And U2F is better than Authenticator.
So Google actually has a new program called Smart Protection or something like that, where you can sign up for it and you have to use U2F, right? You have to use YubiKeys or Trezor or like NanoS, where they force you to use that, so you can't use your phone number for two-factor. So this will really protect your Google account. So if you use Gmail and you turn that on, pretty much really hard for someone to hack your Gmail. And if they can't hack your Gmail, then it's really hard for them to hack your other accounts.
Using the Pixel phone, it's a whole new login authentication that's not even like that anymore. It's like they have a whole new extra. Pixel is the Google phone, so it's their first hardware, display. And
Who uses them?
so there's a way that when you log into a Google account and your Google Pixel is now like your ID, it'll verify on there, show a picture or a number, and it's totally separated from any identifying information other than your hardware. So that might be the way a lot of things have to go. I know a lot of people have had their Bitcoin stolen from ghosted SIM cards. And I've used Google Voice for 10 years, so I've never had a problem.
Steve, did you ever?
Yeah.
So if you don't have the YubiKey, that's to me the number one thing. That and either a Trezor or a Nano Ledger-esque. But those devices, and then try not to keep too much out on the exchange. And I know it's really hard because as the appreciation keeps happening, I was telling Austin I had like a little bit in Kraken. All of a sudden, next thing I know, I had a lot in Kraken, and I didn't even have my limit set, so I couldn't even get it out fast enough when I wanted to get to it. But anyway, the other thing is make sure that you can't actually get to your coins as you're walking around. I think it's a matter of time before the man in the van like sweeps somebody up and. So I don't travel with anything where I can move anything more than that's on my phone. I don't keep anything more on my phone than if I lose my wallet and I lose a couple $100, no big deal. So I feel the same way. I just keep enough coin on my person, but it would take me days to get to my big stores of things.
For the record, I have no Bitcoin. I have no either.
None.
No, you kidding me?
So the second question is lighter. Like there's all these interesting digital use cases, but what is the most forward-thinking, and you just can throw out a name if you want to plow through the panel, what is the most forward-thinking connection to real life blockchain application? Like I'll throw one out, like Proby is, for instance, who's spoken in this room, doing real estate transactions. Like, what are some interesting blockchain companies where people are actually not doing something that 5 other people are doing?
I think the ID is the most important part. If we get a digital ID on the internet, we can do digital voting. We can do a lot of controlling of our governments from our phones without anyone in the middle anymore. And we don't want, Jamie Dimon voting 100 million times from his phone. So that's the real big problem, is identifying someone. And we're not going to use a social security number as an ID, and we're going to have to find a new number. And the United States might actually release a new kind of number because we don't have a social security number system anymore. They're all gone.
That's our public key now.
And it's gonna, and that's what I mean. They're gonna have to do something very smart like that. And otherwise Americans aren't gonna go to the DMV anymore, especially with the United States ID Act, where certain states can't even use federal facilities without a federal ID. That's gonna have a number on it. And it's probably gonna be connected to a blockchain transaction to make sure it's real, like Civic does, you know? You wanna timestamp your ID to make sure no one can fake it? I would trust that ID a lot more than any DMV ID.
Yeah, but
Especially online.
having the government adopt anything is only when their hands are tied and they're forced to do that. So
I want to say one important thing. I am a son of a Marine. I do not believe in the government. I believe compartmentalization.
No way. No one.
I really believe compartmentalization is the biggest problem on Earth, and the fact that Steve Woz just met Paul Allen and their bosses didn't let them meet for 40 fucking years and they invented everything shows that compartmentalization is a problem. And when I teach the US Army how to do things, they're like, well, we hold the gold. But no one there knows what Bitcoin is. And then when you teach someone, it's a compartmentalization trickle-down thing. And if people in the government are doing one thing, there's one guy. It's not one big thing. Because my Marine family hates the government, but they got paid by the government. And if the government ever told them to do something really bad, they would pull their guns out and say, no, this is called a coup, and we're going to put a new government in. That's why I focus on the military, because I really don't like the government but I don't think they exist.
Bitcoin doesn't have a navy, I agree. But to answer your question, I think the most interesting use case I've seen, and I talked to a lot of big, Bloq, what we do is we implement enterprise blockchain systems. But it seems that we're seeing a lot of traction in the supply chain management. And in particular, if you think about certifying a process, whatever that process is, whether it's chip manufacturing, whether it's a company trying to do seed to fork, and they want to certify processes along the way of where those seeds came from, et cetera, et cetera. So you think about the data involved in that process, and being able to take that data and put it through a hashing algorithm, and put that hashing algorithm and timestamp it on a blockchain. I think that's really cool stuff, and we're going to see some great innovation in that space soon.
There's something I find really interesting that's kind of a proof of concept for something broader, which is rare pepes. And so rare pepes are essentially trading cards on the blockchain, much like you might have a Michael Jordan rookie card, and it's worth whatever $1,000, and you might your grandma might come and say, well, why is that worth $1,000? I can just take a photograph of it. It's the same thing. Or the same thing with fine art, right? You can have a poster of fine art for $1, or you could pay $1 million for the actual original. I think rare pepes is the proof of concept for all sorts of authentication in media and art, and the beginning of a new era in provenance for rare assets in general.
I'm gonna say the most interesting thing to me is really why I got involved in this, which is eliminating a lot of corruption and fraud, having a level of transparency, and really targeting the remittance market where poor people sending money to their families are not paying exorbitant fees. So we're not there yet, and I can't tell you who's going to be doing these things and creating this larger implication, but if I would guess, it would be a company that already has market share in this, and starting from scratch at this point is really, really difficult. So company already trying to tackle these and then integrating blockchain.
Okay, fair enough.
Next question.
Unfortunately, I come from the banking background. I apologize.
Be nice, everyone.
I've already been cursed by enough people here. So the question I have is, at the moment, you can see the impact of Bitcoin on banking elites. The question is, how do you think that the banking industry is going to change when the transactions in Bitcoins are going much, much more than now?
They're already doing this. In my last company, we talked to a ton of banks, and they really wanted to integrate blockchain. And I would say there's already a few doing that, not all of them public. So as I mentioned with a minute ago, when we were talking to a lot of banks to help them move money from one country and currency to another, instead of relying on this corresponding banking network and trust and losing a lot of money in slippage and in time. So they're already starting to do it. They've been having these conversations for years, and they already have a lot of departments that have a blockchain aspect.
Okay, we have time for one. Did you have one in the back? All the way in the back.
Yeah, I just
Shout it out, because I can't get them.
You mentioned taxes on Bitcoin, but I've heard about stories that utility tokens have been sold. They can be considered like goods and services, and that's actually true. And the tax goes up to like 40% in certain cases. And obviously investors are not aware of that.
Utility tokens?
Like there is a tax, when you sell utility tokens to American investors, it basically have to pay.
I think he's asking about the tax implications of some of these altcoins and ICOs. That there actually, I think there was one IRS agent that wrote something in light of the Bitcoin Cash dividend. But this is probably a huge open question, and I don't think we're going to get any clarity on that before next April 15th. Crypto in general, I think, is going to be a long tail. I guess it's going to be something that is really going to force tax collection, tax policy, and the agencies that rely on that to change fundamentally. Maybe they move towards more consumption-based, where they can kind of police that more efficiently, but I don't know.
I think we should get rid of capital gains tax. Who's with me?
Yeah,
let's get rid of tax in general.
Rico.
Most of the world doesn't have capital gains tax.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of countries don't have capital gains tax.
They have way higher.
Yeah, but what I'm seeing in the ICO market is a lot of them are structuring things internationally where they're a foundation that's actually doing the ICO is in a tax efficient country. And, yes, and so that there's a lot of very clever accountants and and lawyers that are figuring out how to structure those things.
Okay, that's all the time we have for questions right now. But don't leave, because I believe, and Pema will validate this in a minute, there's going to be a few pitches that are going to be done at the end here. But before we do that, please give a round of applause to this great panel.